Welcome everyone, I'm Kim Bremer, your host today for another edition of BoviNews, keeping you up to date on the cattle industry's latest in technology, management, genetics, and more. Over the past several years, the use of IVF technology has become more popular for dairy producers as a way to speed genetic progress. On today's BoviNews webinar, we'll hear from producers, veterinarians, and IVF providers on best practices to get started or on how to improve your success with IVF. Our first presenters are Tanner Schmaling and Dr. Dan Gander. Tanner is the owner and operator of Maple-Leigh Futures located in Delavan, Wisconsin. He, along with his wife, Madeline, and parents John and Jill, started Maple-Leigh in September of 2017. The facility is known for its premier individualized care for both high genomic and high type cattle. Maple-Leigh partners with SVS Repro and Boviteq to offer an array of services from IVF, conventional flushing, and advanced donor management. Tanner, along with his team, also specialize in show cattle housing and have cared for and exhibited a number of grand champions and All-Americans and All-Canadians over their first 4 years of business. And Dr. Dan Gander is a partner at Stateline Veterinarian Service, where his professional focus has been in advanced reproductive technologies and bovine embryo transfer. SVS is a food animal practice covering southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois. In 2016, SVS began offering ambulatory OPU service in partnership with Boviteq in Madison, Wisconsin. Success increased demand and business growth, leading to the building of 2 donor housing and collection facilities in the fall of 2017. Maple-Leigh Futures is a key partner in providing elite dairy donor housing management and ET and IVF services. Welcome to the webinar today.
Thank you, Kim, for that introduction. I'm Tanner Schmaling, as she said. I was the founder of Maple-Leigh Futures along with my family. In 2017, we started it. We specialize in premier donor housing and individualized management here at Maple-Leigh. We offer a number of things. As was stated before, we offer IVF services, conventional flushing, and show cow and heifer housing. Things that kind of make us tick here at Maple-Leigh, I would say we specialize more so in individualized donor management. We have heavy focus on average daily gains. We do body condition scoring once a month, and then we do donor walkthroughs throughout the day. We also put a lot of emphasis on nutrition here at Maple-Leigh, and then we put a lot of work and pride in our attention to detail. And I'll go through each of those things a little bit more in depth. As far as average daily gains and body condition scores, donors are weighed once a month, once when entering the facility, and then monthly after that. We're looking for a goal of average daily gain of over 2 on a donor. Donors are also body condition scored once a month. We have a goal of between 2.75 and 3.25. We do the body condition scoring with our nutritionist, Dr. Strauss, and we go through those with him, coupled with donor performance and average daily gains and body condition scores. We come up with individualized rations for each animal as far as the amount of grain each individual donor will receive. And like I said, coupled with performance, that'll give us a good gauge as to where a donor is at. Next, we do donor walkthroughs. Those occur daily, once in the morning at feeding and once in the evening at feeding as well. They're also done throughout the day. We'll just go through each pen. We're looking for signs of respiratory disease, irregular manure, or any other stress that the donor may be dealing with. And once that is identified in each donor, that donor is treated immediately just to optimize donor health. Another thing we focus heavily on here at Maple-Leigh is nutrition. Our primary feedstuffs here are haylage and sorghum sudan grass. That coupled with the donor grain top dress, as I spoke about before, is our main ingredients here in our rations. Like I said, the amount of top dress that we give each donor is based on average daily gain, body condition, and the donor's performance in the OPU room. Feed samples are taken quarterly or every time there's a change in the feed stuff. We try to keep the feed stuff changes to a minimum, as we know it's important to kind of maintain a steady, balanced diet. And feed is pushed up multiple times throughout the day just to ensure there's fresh feed in front of the donors at all times. They have access to fresh feed and water. And our biggest thing that we take the most pride in here at Maple-Leigh, I think, is our attention to detail. Like I said before, we specialize in individualized donor management. We don't treat each pen as a pen. We treat each donor as an individualized donor. I think that's contributes to a lot of our success that we've had here. Bed packs are picked multiple times a day. We do that when we're walking through the donors just to make sure everybody's all right. New bedding is incorporated every day and spread out just to ensure that there's dry bedding under donors at all times and they're not laying in wet or soiled manure. The main thing is just keeping them clean, dry, and comfortable. That sets us up for the best success to optimize donor performance in the OP room. Like I said before, we're all about maximizing comfort here. So we have fans on all the time during the summer. During the winter, we keep the barn closed up as much as possible, just to keep the donors comfortable. Alleys are scraped and bedded once a day in the mornings after chores, and bedding is put down in the scrape alleys as well, just to ensure some footing there. And the biggest thing is donors are handled with care in a calm manner. We like to treat each donor as, you know, as a girl they are, and make sure they're treated well and walked up to the OP room slowly and calmly.
Tanner and I have taken on the topic of donor management, and he's done a great job of discussing those things that are key factors in managing donors in an IVF facility. But it's not specific to IVF. It takes care of really great cattle here, and it's shown in the show ring and definitely showing in our OP results. My focus when I look at donor management is to apply those principles that I feel are key. And the focus is, if we have a donor, we identify an animal as one that we would like to harvest her genetics and utilize her genetics across our program. Treat the donor like she's a donor, right? They are the future of your program. And so if you're going to invest, put your dollars in a smart place. So on the donor health side, donor health is a big component of donor management. We do a number of things to make sure that animal coming into our donor facility is healthy. Number one, come in with a CBI, come in with a veterinarian signing off on the health of that animal, and definitely meeting all the requirements of our entry into our facility. We want to maintain a healthy population within this facility. We also, at the time of entry, we catch everything up to date. We equalize the donors and their vaccinations, and we also will stimulate or supplement with minerals and vitamins that might be necessary, might help performance of that donor if she hasn't received adequate amounts pre-entry. We also like to get our hands on the donors ourselves, and so we'll do a physical exam and do reproductive exam as well, just to make sure those animals are ready to be worked and they're healthy enough to be worked. And if we need to delay, then we'll delay 2 weeks or a month if that is what we feel is necessary. Donor nutrition is just as key as anything that we're going to talk about today, and Tanner's talked about what we do here at Maple-Leigh Futures, but really the basis is, the really key part is, we got to make sure the feed quality is high and it's clean and it's stable, right? We don't want changes. We want to make sure that we're not doing harm to our donors by feeding feeds that are high in mycotoxins that might hurt our oocyte quality. We want to make sure that concentrate mix, if we're using that, is complete. You know, it's covering for any deficiencies that we may have in the forage. But also we want to make sure that we are keeping up, or we are our ration is doing what we would like it to do. So we pair those oocyte production, those embryo production results with growth results, and we measure those things via VCS and average daily gains. Donor stimulation is something that we talk about and I specialize in. All of our donors here at Maple-Leigh, almost all of ours are work via IVF, not via OPU. So that is definitely our focus. We set up with dominant follicle removal, and we are a big advocate for stimulating with FSH. You do that in every 12-hour intervals, and we'll run it out over 5, 6, or 7 shots before OPU. We feel that this program is focused on maximizing the donor's production while she's on site. And so that is why we use FSH, and that is why we do DFR, to make sure we set up the donor accurately, precisely, and we use FSH to recruit follicles, recruit the most follicles, or competent follicles possible to create the most embryos. So we do perform DFR, and we use FSH, and this is part of the reason why. Right here we show a normal cycle of a two-wave cycle of a potential donor, and if we were to go in and to collect at any point within this cycle, there is a large variation of where we might hit her follicular wave, and where we hit that follicular wave would dictate the performance of that donor. Our preference is to equalize that, and so on the next slide we look at performing DFR and eliminating those dominant follicles, those follicles that would be part of a previous follicular wave, and restart a new wave that is homogeneous in its population, but also one that is competent at the time of OPU. And we have some results here from AETA, published in AETA through our partners sending in their results, and I think some of it's pretty clear. There's 2.1 times the amount of embryos produced when we use FSH versus when we don't. Again, these aren't Boviteq numbers and definitely not Maple-Leigh numbers, but these would just be the average. So this is comparison FSH versus not in the US. And then we look at pregnancies, because that's really the name of the game, and we definitely get a higher conception rate associated with using FSH, and 2.1 versus 0.8 in this study here. Our big focus with using FSH is to create stimulated ovaries, stimulated with good uniform follicles, and we know that these uniform follicles create excellent oocyte quality. At the end of the day, that is our focus. Here's a picture of groups of oocytes, and that would be our typical day, just large numbers of just high quality oocytes with a lot of cumulus. Our donor performance at Maple-Leigh, and this would be Q1, Q2 of 2021, is 23.9 oocytes per OPU and 9.4 embryos per OPU with a 39.5% development rate. And these are consistent. Our average population here at Maple-Leigh would be just at 8 months of age. When we look at recip management, it's a lot of the same things that we would focus on from the donor side. And so we want to treat them like they're carrying our most valuable genetics. And so clean, stable ration, let's keep them healthy, and definitely need to limit stress. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanner and Dr. Gander. Our next presenter is Shantille Kruse. Shantille is the Director of Business Development for Boviteq, providing technical consulting and supporting vet partners, new vet recruitment and onboarding, key account management, and IVF cycle performance and volume tracking, as well as overseeing both dairy and beef sales and customer service. Welcome, Shantille.
Thank you, Kim. So I appreciate having Tanner and Dr. Gander's perspectives, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the lab's perspective with relationship to the donor piece that they deal with, but also on the bull side. So to kind of set the table, I first wanted to mention what embryo production has looked like in the last few years in the U.S. When I started with Boviteq in 2014, people were still talking about IVF potentially being a trend that might go away. I think we are well into it no longer being a trend. So if we look at the 2019 data, the American Embryo Transfer Association collects data each year from its veterinary partners. And so we'll get the 2020 data this fall. So going off of 2019 numbers on the dairy side of things, for in vivo collections, they were at about 8,000 globally versus about 95,000 in IVF, not globally, in the US. So again, about 12 to 1 IVF to in vivo. That being said, I don't think it's probably a trend that is going away. So just wanted to share that really quick. When we think about it from the perspective of, why are people using IVF so much now in comparison to in vivo? For me, really the biggest thing is a greater time frame to work with those elite animals. So we think on the genomic side of things, guys want to get started as early as possible. IVF allows you to work with prepubertal donors every 2 weeks into about 100 days of pregnancy. So again, when we compare that to conventional flushing techniques, you're able to get quite a few more embryos out of those elite animals, again, in a short time frame. And at times where you wouldn't with traditional methods. In addition to that, the IVF process is going to be simpler for the owner. So you don't have to heat detect or breed. I'm sure Dr. Gander would argue that it's more complicated on the veterinarian side of things, but easier on the owners generally. You can also use conventional sex or reverse sorted semen with similar success. Of course, that's going to make the gender selection process easier, and we're able to more efficiently use valuable sires or rare semen or early release young sires specifically, again, when we talk about the genomic side of things. So semen that maybe wouldn't work as well in AI, again, on those really young bulls first collections, we can make work really nicely in IVF. In addition to that, the majority of donors, according to our data here at Boviteq, over 95% of donors will successfully create an embryo. That is going to be higher than what you would see in a conventional flushing system. So we're able to, again, bypass some of those donors that might have issues with oviduct or CL, making enough progesterone to get to day 7, those types of things. So able to make embryos a little bit more successfully as well in comparison to conventional flush. One thing that I wanted to visit with you about on the donor side of things is just kind of really setting up for success. Of course, the first thing that we're going to do if we're looking at this from a genomic standpoint is we're going to identify those donors and recipients both, right? Through genomics so that we know which are our most elite animals that we're trying to make more of. I think everybody is pretty much on the same page with that being a key component of any IVF program. But antral follicle count is probably a lesser known component. So antral follicle count is basically just the number of follicles visible on the ovary at any given point in time, except when she's going to be in heat. So your veterinarian can go in and scan those ovaries and give you a good idea of how an animal is going to perform in IVF in terms of the number of oocytes she's going to make. So that's really repeatable within an individual, especially after she reaches puberty. And because oocytes are, of course, the rate limiting step in the reaction, right? It correlates with the number of embryos she's going to make. So I tell guys to use it as a ranking system, essentially. So if you say, I want to collect my top 10 animals to make enough embryos for the recipients that I have available. So if you're going to go and walk through those again, have your veterinarian scan those. If your number 10 donor makes on average, let's say, 8 follicles, and your number 11 donor makes on average, let's say 30 follicles, that might be an easy swap to go ahead and say, okay, she's not quite as good genetically, but she makes a heck of a lot more oocytes and therefore is very likely to make a lot more embryos. That would be a good swap to just go ahead and pull some of those low performers out again so that you're optimizing the number of embryos that you can make. The other thing with antral follicle count is that it is moderately heritable. So when you're selecting these females that have higher antral follicle counts, they're more likely then to have daughters with higher antral follicle counts that will also respond well to IVF. I think, again, Dr. Gander and Tanner said a lot on the donor side of things, and treat donors like donors. It's a simple kind of saying that we have around the Boviteq crew and the vets that we work with, but it's, we should be treating them like they're the most elite animals on the farm. So again, Tanner touched on housing them in small groups so that they can really manage the diet well and give FSH. I think Dr. Gander really emphasized the need to give FSH. I think it's very clear in those ATA numbers that FSH is necessary, both from an embryo production standpoint, but also a pregnancy standpoint, right? Another thing that guys, I think, fail to sometimes overlook, they think that maybe implementing a donor management program on their location is something that they just don't have the resources available. That's why places like Maple-Leigh exist, right? Because the people at Maple-Leigh eat, sleep, breathe donor care and management, and they have the ability to dedicate, the majority of their day to taking care of these animals and ensuring that everything is optimized. So I would encourage anybody on a dairy that feels like they don't have the resources to manage donors, right? That's why satellites exist. So go ahead and feel free to rely on the expertise of a satellite center. The other piece on oocyte quality I would just emphasize is that that's typically going to be determined before the veterinarian even sets foot on the place, right? So the things that Tanner is doing to prepare those donors really dictates oocyte quality, the nutrition aspects they talked about, just watching their health, watching any changes in the diet. Those are all really important things. Of course, on Dr. Gander's side of things and his crew, right, there's some things that they do as well to ensure that they're sending the best quality oocytes, but what they do can't rescue a bad quality oocyte. So it's really important from a management standpoint that we're starting with the best quality oocyte possible. The same is true on the IVF side of things. If we start with poor quality oocytes, there's nothing that we can do at the lab to really rescue a poor quality oocyte. So it really kind of starts at the beginning from a management standpoint. The next piece that we haven't touched on yet is sire selection. I would encourage anybody that's considering doing IVF to work with their provider to submit those bull choices early and ask for feedback. So pretty much I would expect all of the labs to be able to provide feedback on a bull. So if you say, hey, how is bull A doing? They might say we've used him 50 times and he works average or he works above average or even below, right? And then you can make some decisions off of that. If a lab has not used a bull before, they do, at Boviteq, we have the ability to test. That's probably not true of every lab, but at Boviteq, we do have the ability to test, and we can tell you how we expect a bull to perform based on that test. And even after a test is done, I would still encourage people to introduce new bulls slowly. So we just got done with a round of proofs not too long ago. As you can imagine, right, a bunch of new bulls coming onto the mating sheets that we hadn't seen before. And as an example, if you're a dairy that's working 20 donors every 2 weeks, instead of literally putting all your eggs in one basket to a new bull and running that new bull to all 20 head, I would suggest introducing him to 10 to 20% of your donors just to start off with initially, so we can again get a better baseline and ensure that bull is optimized before we use it on everything. So typically I would say using a bull about 3 times is required before you really get his conditions optimized. Again, that's why we encourage slower introduction. I would also encourage anyone that's working donors to be flexible on their sire choice. So again, just like we talked about donors being variable on the number of oocytes they make, but repeatable, same thing is true on bull performance. So we see a lot of variability in bull performance, and it tends to be quite repeatable within a bull once he's optimized. So if he doesn't work well, I would, flat out decide what that line is for your dairy and pretty much try to stick to that, right? So poor performing bulls, as an example, our average development at Boviteq is around 40%. So if you have if you're doing 40%, you're averaging 7 or 8 embryos a donor, and we pick a bull that does 20, automatically drop that 7 or 8 to 3.5 or 4. So bull choice plays a huge role, and I would advise, again, being flexible on bull choice, and be willing to just cull those bulls that don't work well for your program. The next thing I wanted to cover here was recipient selection. I know Dan touched on that a little bit. I think one of the things that folks sometimes get hung up on is getting excited about their recip setup. And I would just say that it doesn't need to be very complicated, right? Because if we think about what recips are doing, we just need a good CL. We don't care about the oocyte quality. We're not going to use that oocyte. She's not going to be, AI'd or anything like that. So we don't really care about oocyte quality. So programs set up to ovulate the most optimal oocyte become less relevant in this situation, right? So we really just care that she has a good CL. And the majority of recips that we use actually for our internal program are set up on a really simple double shot prostaglandin. And again, so just emphasizing that that doesn't need to be complicated. The other thing is that when we go onto dairies and we're trying to work in a new system and we want to make it as least complicated for them as possible, if they do have a standard sync protocol for the dairy, we say that's usually okay to go ahead and use that standard sync protocol and then just hold those heats over that you would normally breed to AI. I would also encourage any dairy using IVF to keep a bank of frozen embryos. On the frozen side of things, those are going to be simpler for transfer. So we're just pulling them out of a tank, putting them into a gun, and then transferring them into the uterus. That embryo transfer process is more complicated than AI, but you can certainly train folks on the dairy to do that. And it's going to be a faster and easier process when we compare that to fresh. And because we have a certain cutoff for frozen embryos, those frozen embryos should be better quality than the fresh, as a group overall. So I would encourage anybody to keep a bank of frozen embryos. Obviously, make sure you're rotating through that inventory to keep it relevant genetically. And then on the flip side, the thing to consider with fresh embryos, so you're going to be a little bit cheaper on fresh embryos because you're not paying to freeze each one. But on the fresh side of things, you're going to need someone who can receive those fresh embryos, who can grade and load those embryos on day of transfer. And so that gets a little bit more complicated in terms of managing recipients and the personnel that you have to have there to do that. And then the last piece of advice I would give to anybody doing a program is, I think everybody's grandpa used to say this, at least mine sure did, is that you can't manage what you don't measure. So I would certainly encourage you to review your results regularly and adjust where you see issues. On our side of things, we do quarterly reports that we share with our veterinarians and clients each quarter, showing them how they're performing on an average, and then we compare that to our Boviteq average and then to the ATA average. We also give feedback on every mating with less than 35% development. So we're looking at that donor response, and that's something that the veterinarians can look at. Of course, day of OPU, they get a good gauge of follicle size. On the lab side of things, for the oocyte searching technicians, they get a good idea of what oocyte quality looks like at day of OPU. We see what those changes then look like in comparison as they arrive at the lab. We've got information that we include about bull past performance, as well as donor past performance. And all of those things culminates in basically a recommendation for what we can improve going forward. And I think Tanner hit the nail on the head when he said that we don't blanket treat anything. We treat everything as an individual. That would be true throughout all tiers of our system. And so just kind of honing in and making those fine adjustments on individuals is very important for the overall success of your program. And then the last piece of advice is, obviously, at the end of the day, we want pregnancies and calves. So tracking pregnancy data and then live calf rate is really important to understand the success of your program as well. And with that, thank you guys for taking the time to talk with us today. And I will turn it back over to Kim.
Thank you, Shantille. Our final presenter today is Steve Maddox, who serves as managing partner of Maddox Dairy and partner in RuAnn Holsteins. Steve is passionate that his cows are well cared for and produce a highly nutritious product for today's conscientious consumer. The Maddox Dairies maintain the philosophy to treat each cow as if she was the only cow. Steve has provided leadership to many state and national dairy organizations, including the National Dairy Board, the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy Sustainability Council, California Dairies Incorporated, and Dairy Cares. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you for inviting me here. Today I've been asked to talk about our IVF program and our efforts to upgrade our cattle, both economically, efficiency, and health-wise in our herds, using IVF and using speeding up the turnover in cows genetically with embryo production. First of all, RuAnn and Maddox Dairy, we've got 4,500 registered Holsteins in milk, along with the accompanying young stock. Again, all registered. We've been producing between 7,000 and 10,000 embryos a year. Over the last 10 years, that's transitioned from mainly a regular embryo transfer program to an IVF program, with 90% of our embryos now being produced by in vitro. And we have an in-house IVF lab that we started in the early 90s, Flushing with an intensive program since then. Over the time, we have invited our friends and neighbors and do also outside work. Our lab is one of the few certified for Europe and China and export anywhere around the world. And we don't just do Holsteins, we also do some work for Jersey producers and some Angus people. Now, our lab isn't really elaborate. It's as shown on the video or on the slides here, just a very simple setup, low cost, but still within the guidelines of the International Embryo Transfer Association and setting up through APHIS to export the embryos. We have three embryologists. We have a vet on staff full-time dealing with that and making the embryos. But again, we've been having this lab here, was built in the early 90s, and it's very easily served our purposes. We also produce embryos for 6 other large Holstein and Jersey herds that milk over 35,000 cows. With us having so many registered cattle, we need to market the next level of cows. And these people see the gain of embryos from high genetic, high merit, or cows that really work well in the California setup. On this slide in front of you is some of our top genetic animals from RuAnn Alpha and Noram, which is one of the top animals of the breed. And we've sold embryos out of most of these various places around the world. A lot of these dairies are looking at improving, like we do, improving our conception. Our goals, our embryo transfer program is, again, to push genetic improvement, selecting from our top 1% of TPI or net merit cows, type and pedigree. Yes, I have the bug of showing cows, so I have some divas. We do exhibit cows at shows. So we, in addition to running for the production traits, we also select for type traits, and we've got three or four of the top 25 animals for genomic type of the Holstein breed. We also use it as a reproductive tool, and that's really where a lot of the local dairymen, commercial guys come in. We increase the pregnancy rates in lactating cows, especially during the summer and early fall when it's so hot, because you're actually starting with a pregnancy. You're not having to worry about the cow actually releasing an egg. Sales, again, we've sold cattle and embryos and genetics around the world to 50 different countries over the last 50 years. Beyond live females, a lot of its embryos are bull semen. We have sold bulls to a lot of people. Right now, a very hot topic that we're a market that we're doing is that we're selling Angus embryos to Jersey producers that are sexed, so that the local calf buyers are paying a premium for that, and giving them some value on the cattle beyond their sex semen that they're using. The bottom of this slide is the cost per embryo or pregnancy of a live calf. You have different prices of embryos. Some people are selling packing shed eggs fertilized with the top bulls and giving a very low cost per embryo, sometimes as low as $35. But your conception rates, your quality of those embryos really affects your price as a calf at the end of the day. The other thing too is that you're getting an egg or the genetics from something you don't know. And so it's better either just use the semen on your own cows, or know the mother and the father of an embryo going into that. And obviously, we state if you can't get at least 50% conception, you shouldn't do this, or something close to that. And as the example shows at the bottom, if you can get close at 2 embryos per pregnancy, that's really a goal you ought to shoot for. Next page shows the genetic progress that we've had in our herd for the last 10 years. And yes, it's not excessively high for 2019, but again, we have a certain amount, probably about 25% of our embryos are picked on the type end of it, not the production end of it. Otherwise, it would probably be even more spread on that. But remarkable genetic progress when you know when you're selecting not just the sire, but the sire and the dam going into that. Of course, your goal is a live, healthy baby calf. Obviously, you get the best quality embryos you can, grade number 1s. If you're using frozen embryos, you can go to grade 2s if you're not, and get similar results if you're putting those in fresh. Obviously, fresh embryos would be your highest conception rates. You want an experienced practitioner putting it in the embryos, although a good arm man who's trained properly can do the same thing, but a trained veterinarian who's trained in embryos really is your best bet with the cost of these. Then you have to take really good care of the recipient during pregnancy, trying to reduce your abortion rates. We will find that some of our donor cows have a higher abortion rate in their embryos than some other donors, and those animals find themselves moved out of the donor range because, again, the results is a live calf at the end of this. And it's important to calve by due dates and with normal size. The original IVF that we had 12 and 15 years ago, every once in a while you'd have enlarged calves. We've brought some people up from Brazil to help us formulate a fetal calf serum to work the embryos in vitro, and we've actually reduced that and gotten that on a more consistent basis so we know what we're getting into. Your flesh and in vitro embryos, from 2008 to 2018, on this slide, you see that, fresh embryos in the heifers, we've averaged 66% conception on over 16,000 implants. Lactating cows were around 59% on fresh embryos with almost nearly 7,300 implants. In frozen embryos, obviously a little less. Heifers are 57% on 4,400 embryos. Lactating cows with 4,500 embryos is around 46%. Now, what we do though is that we compare these rates to our AI. You don't take them on just a purely face value type of thing. What you look at is some of those recipients are rejected because they didn't have a corpus or weren't in the right stage. And you need to add those back to your implanted embryo stats and as open animals, because if they were AI, you'd normally be breeding those, so you can gauge that. And we're normally at worst 1 or 2% above our AI anyway, and sometimes as high as 10% better off. But better quality embryos gives you more pregnancies in every category. Next, we have a 2020 Statistical Information Committee report that was given by my veterinarian, and basically, get your heifers well grown, and this shows you the amount of embryos that are being transferred in the United States over the last 10 years, from 2009 to 2019, with the in vivo or traditional flesh embryos dropping off almost in half to 34,000 in 2019, and in vitro really taking off in 2016 as people figured out how to have a normal size calf, up almost 5 times as much to 208,000. More in vitro embryos allows you to work younger heifers a little earlier in your genetic progress. You can use sex semen, more female calves. 90%, like I said, 90% of our embryos in our in-house are IVF embryos. Our quality has improved in the last 10 years, both pregnancy rates, we've lowered abortion rates, we've reduced our large calf syndrome. And in 2008 with in vitro, we started with a 20% pregnancy rate and obviously have improved that. The next slide is terms and definitions. And basically recipients are heifers natural heat versus second services is what we use. Lactating cows, a pre-sync off-sync program of the double lute. We like them less than 7 or greater than 75 days in milk. First service, first and second lactations is what we've had our best results with. Older cows than that, sometimes will go to third lactation, but you get really picky on who you're picking out depending on their condition of their uterus. Embryo transfer, obviously, everybody knows you go 6, 7, 8, or even 9 days after estrus. We tended to avoid the 6 days. Actually, the 9 days has got a higher conception rate than 6, probably because sometimes with the variability in the uterine preparation on a natural flow of the cow, you're not as the uterus is not ready to accept the embryo yet. Where on day 9, with the way that nature works, you're probably still on it, but we'll still have a 20 to 30% better conception rate over a day 6. And so that really allows you to work your weekend heats on a Monday morning, and we have very good results. We only use recipients with a good CL corpus to receive an embryo. You don't do anything on a prayer or a hope. Pregnancy rate, the number of pregnancies divided by the total transfers. Obviously, I took this from my vet. She doesn't always like to do the full shot, but on heifers, we're preg checking in between 40 and 47 days after their heat, not their implant date. And then lactating cows, we're taking blood samples and doing blood pregnancies 28 to 34 days after estrus. Using the blood work, blood pregnancy rate on our IDEX machine, we're able to go right back in. If the animal shows is open, you really minimize your days in milk. Next slide is your sync program or pre-sync and off-sync, and basically it's very standard. And this is not unique to us. This is just the one that we've arrived at that works really well for us. And yeah, it's a lot of shots, but when you're getting in the high 50s and 60% success rate, this is the way to go. Other than this, you really want to use visual heats. Visual heats also will give you your best results. Now, your pregnancy rates differ between heifers and cows, and that's a good question. On your grade 1s, grade 2s, and grades 1s and 2s, you can see across here, this was basically 2017 through a 3-year process from 2017 to 2019 embryo transfer program with here 5,000 implants in grade 1s had 51% conception. Grade 2s was 34% conception. Some of these were frozen, not fresh. And of course, you've got the combination for 47% overall. Interesting that the cows actually in grade 1s were actually a little bit better, but those are also a higher percentage of fresh embryos. But again, it goes back to better quality embryos, more pregnancies in all categories. You also look at time of the year on pregnancy rates, and really not much difference in the stage or time of the year on these Critical months, of course, is June through October. It's harder to make good quality embryos through summer and early fall because just like our normal cows are breeding AI, you don't know, because of the heat or the stress of the cows, they don't always produce good eggs, good quality eggs. So we will go with the best quality that we can find, or frozen embryos, and actually do better than putting out a questionable quality embryo for implanting. Frozen embryos in IVF, direct thaw. Here you got a 1 year basis for different technicians, A, B, C, D. We grade our technicians that do the implanting. Obviously, technician number C on the 7 days got bragging rights. However, technician D on 8 days is cleaning up, and he actually follows through with the highest conception rate clear through. But you do have variability by embryo transfer practitioner, and the main thing is to measure it, to address it, find your problems just like we do on the dairy, and fine tune it and practice. On your recipient checklist, again, we like to go over 75 days of milk for Holsteins, over 60 days of milk for Jerseys. AI conception rates is a prediction of the ET rates. You have to remember that an embryo transfer program will not fix a bad breeding program. You need to entice that. We had several groups come to us that wanted us to provide embryos to fresh IVF embryos to help them during the summer months. In analyzing their herd results, this one group of 7 dairies of all drinking buddies, that probably, but they said this one guy was the best. And when we really started analyzing it, he was less than a 20% 21-day preg rate. And what we've found is that you really need to be 24 or 25% 21-day preg rate to even consider embryos. So like I said, embryos will not fix it. It'll highlight your problems because you won't get the results you like. AI conception rates is you want to go for decide whether you're going to go with visual heats or synchronization. If you go with synchronization, it's very important to be diligent on your timing of your shots because one follows another. And if you're off several hours in your shots, you won't like the results that you get. And then also minimize your movements and stress prior to or after the embryos within a couple of days. And obviously the implant dates is more important to be 7 or 8 days. You can stretch it to 9 if you have to. So other examples, here's some herds outside, fresh Holstein embryos to Holstein lactating cows on this KC herd. We've had 360 embryos in the last 12 months with a 55% pregnancy rate. Embryo selection is very important. We did retrain the veterinarian to implant, and you will have some sire differences. We've ranged from 53% to 80%, depending on the sire of the embryos. Another herd, a Jersey herd, fresh embryos into Jersey lactating cattle. Again, focused on embryo selection, technician training. It took 3 years of adjustments to get to this point. And then you see the results at the bottom with the overall results of 51.9% pregnancy rate. And there in Jerseys, you can go a little older to 4th lactation. And then here's a Jersey herd that we're putting fresh Angus embryos in on contract. 368 embryos the last 8 months. Again, training the technician, embryo selection, working with them, and they're hitting a pretty good 55% pregnancy rate. And this one almost from the get-go, this guy's breeding program was really excellent, and it just took off from there. This next herd is a Jersey lactating herd where the owner is buying Angus Wagyu cross embryos to put it in the cows. Their first couple of implants where they were bragging about or talking about their high conception rates, we had a 15% pregnancy rate. And in changing their selection criteria and the recipients and working with the implanting vet, we've moved that to a 55% pregnancy rate on fresh and frozen IVF embryos. And but the recipient selection was of the utmost. Make sure you had visual heats, or in this herd it was visual heats. In the other herds, it's synchronization. It's also important on the next slide to collect your data and do follow-up, so you can follow up and measure your donors, measure your recipients, and find problems early. And this shows you on this slide, you have a 17% on this donor number 70. Obviously, she's a show cow. Otherwise, you wouldn't be flushing her that often and messing with her. But the cow on the left, the cows on the left are all cows that are high production, that are producing lots of high quality embryos. And those are really the ones you want to focus on. And that also improves your fertility in the herd genomically. Now, these costs are on this slide are done by my veterinarian. Obviously, if you do in-house, it's a little different thing. These cost of embryos include the genetic values on the animals, but you evaluate the cost per embryo per pregnancy, especially on live calf, and your economic return based on your selection criteria. But because we do have people trying to peddle cheap embryos or leftover frozen embryos, and you get what you pay for on that. But it all ends up with a success rate of a live calf on the ground. That's really what you have to judge your total costs on. And that isn't even going into figuring the cost of your days open. Finally, just remember to work with good quality embryos. Your ideal time is implanting the embryos, the IVF embryos, 7 and 8 days after estrus. Focus on first and second services on either heifers or your lactating cows. Again, lactating cows, we found good results going cows over 75 days fresh on Holsteins and over 60 days fresh on Jerseys. The herds you work with, make sure you have a good AI program, a good breeding program, then this will just enhance it. Again, embryo transfer, IVF embryos will not fix a breeding program that's got some deficiencies. Stick with an experienced embryo transfer practitioner. Obviously, my vet thinks that they need to be a veterinarian. I just think they need to be a good arm man, a good AI technician, but they got to be really diligent, very anal about doing things the right way, and especially track your results and make adjustments accordingly to get your best results. And as always, attention to detail is of the utmost importance. I thank you. On this last slide, you see 2 of our genetically superior show cows. Both these cows have got records over 35,000 pounds of milk. They work well in a freestall setup, but both these cows also walk well in the show ring in Madison, Wisconsin. So I thank you for inviting me, and I welcome your questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Steve. A lot of great information covered. And lastly, we have a couple of technical questions for Katie Lohr. Katie is Boviteq USA's IVF coordinator, monitoring bull performance and oocyte quality. In this role since 2018, she works with her team to ensure optimum fertilization conditions and development results. Prior to this role, Katie was Boviteq's IVF laboratory technician beginning in 2016, verifying matings, grading cumulus, fertilizing oocytes, and communicating oocyte quality trends. What's the one thing that's changed or you've changed about your IVF process that's created the most success?
Sure, thanks, Kim. So I'm gonna get a little technical here and talk about 2 things, VOCs and temperature. So first off, VOCs, also known as volatile organic compounds, can have a negative effect on oocytes and then therefore on embryos as well. A VOC can easily be identified by its strong odor or smell. So removing all products emitting VOCs from the IVF lab has significantly improved development rates. But this can be translated then to work being done on, say, OPU day. So using disinfection agents that list quaternary ammoniums as the active ingredient that do not emit those high amounts of VOCs can have a huge impact. So even something as simple as removing cleaning agents with a strong odor from the collection and oocyte searching areas on OPU day, or avoiding using kerosene heaters can make a huge difference. But along with that, another important variable to consider is temperature control. So for example, keeping oocytes warm throughout the collection and searching process is so important. So when oocytes are kept at a cooler temperature for a long period of time, we might not see the effects right away because development rates tend to be less affected. However, the big difference here is with pregnancy rates. So doing regular checks on any warming equipment to make sure it's functioning properly at the proper temperature can also have a big impact on results.
And Katie, one last thing. What has been your experience using sex semen in the IVF process?
Sure. So about 23% of Boviteq's matings in 2020 were sex male or female. Boviteq also has the technology to sex semen on site, which made up about 13% of our matings last year. Our sex semen development rates run around 34% compared to conventional semen, which is about 40%. Even though we see a slightly lower development rate with sex semen, if you're after females, it's still a much more efficient way to get there versus using conventional semen. The reason sex semen tends to give a little bit more variable results compared to conventional is part because of the sorting process. It's complicated. It adds additional steps for the semen to go through. So anyone looking to get a sexed embryo with IVF, we recommend taking advantage of Boviteq's slaughterhouse testing service that Shantille touched on a little bit earlier, where we can get a head start on those new bulls before using in production and minimize that variability.
Thanks, Katie. And over to you, Shantille. From your perspective, what's the most important component of the IVF process that producers need to make sure that they do correctly?
Sure. Thank you, Kim. Between kind of everybody who talked today, I think Steve said it, I think Tanner said it, I think Dan said it. Attention to detail matters at the end of the day. So when we think about it on the donor side of things, I would say use FSH, record as much information on that animal as possible and make adjustments to ensure that individual is optimized. And then on the bull side of things, again, I would encourage anyone using a new bull to ask the lab that they're working with about past performance and then use that bull accordingly. So if he's a low performer, maybe considering eliminating him from your program, or, you know, if you're willing based on the genetics to use that bull on a few donors, you certainly can. But I would suggest on the bull side of things, again, paying close attention to that and using only those bulls that perform average or above.
And Tanner and Dr. Gander, what about an ideal recip? I know Steve mentioned a recip with a good CL. Are there any other main parameters to consider, and what process have you found works best for getting them set up?
Yeah, the ideal recipient is definitely has a good CL, no doubt. Steve's right on that for sure. But we want that animal to be in good body condition, positive energy balance for sure. If we're using a fresh lactating cow, my preference is to maintain those in their current synchronization method. So if we have a good performing AI herd, why don't we maintain their protocols and get an estrus out beyond 70 days? Just not breed her and use that recipient that way. We love seeing estrus. We love seeing that on the heifer side as well. So whatever it takes to get a nice estrus event with a good CL, that's a gold standard. Natural heats work great. Unfortunately, that's not always the easiest thing to get done. Get transfers on all exclusive natural heats. So we do implement some synchronization methods. Our preference is a 7-day cedar sync. It works very well in our recipient group. But at the end of the day, it's about a good quality CL and limited stress, limited nutritional stress, and setting them up the best way possible.
And for producers considering getting involved in IVF, what advice would you give them to help them start out the right way? Tanner?
Let's say to look at a number of things. The first being choose your most genetically lead animals, whether it be a numbered animal or a show animal. look at the conformation in the cow families too. We're not just looking at numbers. A lot of times in the genomic side of things, we're looking at cow families and the conformation of that cow and what you want your herd to, resemble or what your goals are. The second thing would be treat your donor like a donor. I think we all touched base a little bit on that. They're athletes, and you have to treat them like that. Make sure that they're getting good quality feed, they're comfortable, and if they're trying to tell you something, if they're sick, treat them. And the third thing would be to track the results. I think we all touched on that as well. Track your results, make adjustments accordingly. Whether it be bull choices or choosing different animals if they're not performing.
And Steve, from your perspective, lastly, any advice to people looking to get involved in IVF?
The main thing is a breeding program is looking to the future, and you want to maximize that. That's a long-term investment. So you want to do things as correctly and as right as you can. You have to remember that, my father said years ago with embryo transfer, you're going to have more throwaways, but that was more to do with it on the purebred end of it or on the show end of it, which you do. But again, going back to as what was just said, go for your highest genomic animals, your highest producing animals, the animals or families that do well in your setup, and follow your results. We had a bull that we were getting 60% AI conception, but in the petri dish, or in vitro, the bull was in the 20s for conception, and he just didn't work. So we removed him from the program. The only time you move bulls back like that, my embryologist or my vet cusses at me when we do that, is on some of the show bulls, and we kind of force feed her on those. But do things as right as you can. It's amazing how many of our brethren feel like they can always go back and fix something, but never have time to do something right the first time. And do it as right as you can on a timely basis. And if you're going to go into this, because this is not for the faint of heart, but if you do it right, you'll be really happy with your results.
Well said. My thanks to all of you today for joining us and sharing your invaluable expertise and experience. For the listeners, don't forget to subscribe to the BoviNews channel on YouTube, find our BoviNews podcast on your favorite listening platform, or find more information at bovinews.com. Thanks for tuning in with us today. We'll see you next time on another edition of BoviNews.